the ocean is the most important thing that we have, but that it's in massive trouble and we need to fix it.
A lot of noise is made about deforestation, landfill, and greenhouse gas emissions. But given they make up more than 70% of the Earth's surface, is enough being done to protect our oceans? Nina Jensen doesn't think so, but she's on a mission to change that. The marine biologist spent 15 years at the WWF Norway before becoming the chief executive of REV Ocean, the world's largest research and expedition vessel, which is currently under construction. Once finished, it will be made available to scientists, NGOs, business leaders, and policymakers. And Nina hopes it'll lead to a sea change in attitudes towards the oceans.
It opens up a world of opportunities in terms of getting people with money, people with power to care.
Joining me on this episode of Leaders with Lacqua Goes Green is Nina Jensen, Chief Executive of REV Ocean. Nina Jensen, you're dedicating your life to studying oceans. What exactly is your mission?
Well, nothing is more important than the ocean. It provides us with pretty much everything that we need to have a good life. It gives us more than 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. It provides us with food, energy, water, livelihoods, and a lot of the solutions to the major problems we're facing can be found in the ocean. So what's there to wonder about? You know, we have to look after the ocean.
I mean, it feels like we were a little bit late to the game. So, you know, we talked about global warming, we looked at the ozone layer, we set out targets to achieve without really studying the ocean. Why is that?
That's a good question. I mean, as a marine biologist, I've always thought that the ocean should be on top of the list. But I think in many ways it's out of sight, out of mind. It seems vast, it's largely unexplored, and people just probably thought that it was doing okay. But then I think the global plastic crisis, which became really, really evident a few years back, really was an eye-opener for many people that the state of the ocean is not so good and we urgently need to do something.
Right, and we suddenly realize that actually there's this process called acidification. If you'd love to explain it in simple terms, I'm sure our viewers would benefit from it. But it's basically the fact that if it becomes more acid, then it will be much harder for us to achieve our climate change goals.
That's so true. And in essence, the ocean is taking up a lot of the CO2 that we have produced. The scientists are actually estimated that more than 1/3 of the CO2 that we've emitted so far has been taken up by the ocean. And this, of course, changes the entire chemistry of the ocean, making it more acidic, meaning that the content of CO2 is much higher than it should be. And this, of course, has dramatic impacts for all the organisms in the ocean, and particularly those in the lower parts of the food chain, which are building their skeletons from calcium carbonate. And an increasing amount of CO2 in the ocean and increased acidification makes this process virtually impossible, so that their skeletons and their structures are basically smoldering in between our fingers.
Nina, as a marine biologist, when did you decide you wanted to study the oceans? I mean, it's amazing looking at all the pictures out there of you in wetsuits, like actually understanding and being in the oceans to understand what we're facing.
I think it started at a very early age when I was a kid. Like most kids, we all have a fascination for the ocean, and it was like a safe haven and a place to escape to when everything on land just seemed a little bit overwhelming. And diving down into the kelp forest, seeing all the amazing life underneath the ocean made me extremely fascinated by it, but also wanting to protect it. So ever since I was a kid, I joined the Panda Club when I was the age of 7, and decided at a very early age that I wanted to work for WWF, World Wildlife Fund, to protect it. And here I am, still doing the same thing.
When did you realize that actually we had to protect our oceans better? Was there a eureka moment? Did you realize that actually we're not doing enough, that people were almost uneducated about what was going on beneath what we could see?
Well, given that I became engaged in the ocean from a very early age, I think I already knew, but of course, working for the world's biggest conservation organization puts that very much top of mind. So I spent the broader part of 15 years of my life in WWF working on marine conservation issues before I started up in REV Ocean just a couple of years back. So this realization about the trouble that our ocean is in has been there for a very long time.
REV Ocean is basically like a super yacht with, capabilities once it's built and out in the ocean to collect data, to educate people about what they can do better. What is the mission of REV Ocean?
The mission is relatively simple. It's one healthy ocean, and it's all about gathering the data that we need, making that data and knowledge more readily available, and turning it into concrete solutions. And it's, of course, based on the understanding that the ocean is the most important thing that we have, but that it's in massive trouble and we need to fix it. Only in our lifetime, over the past 40 years, we have lost more than 40% of life in the ocean, and the situation is escalating as a result of climate change, overfishing, and plastic pollution. So we are quickly running out of time, but I feel confident that when we get an increasing number of philanthropists, investors, and the business sector engaged in fixing the problems of the ocean, that we can actually do it.
So, when are you actually expecting to get onto REV Ocean? I know that there was a delay by a couple of years because I imagine manufacturing, or is it permits that actually delayed it by 3 to 4 years?
No, it's actually construction challenges related to weight and some technical issues. So we are unfortunately delayed. It's hard to say at this point. In worst case, it could be up to 3 to 5 years. But we're, of course, hoping that the yard will be able to deliver a vessel according to contract much sooner than that.
So, Nina, talk to me about plastic pollution. A number of countries have actually banned the use of single-use plastic. How much of a difference has that made, and how much more can we do? Is there any low-hanging fruit that actually, if there was a rule tomorrow in the US, in Europe, in Central America, it would make a massive difference?
Well, so far, because the ban has been relatively recent, it hasn't made that much difference yet. But of course, it's regulations like these that will have a big impact on the way forward. Because over the past decade, we've actually produced more plastics than in the entire last century. And the majority of this is ending up in landfills or in the environment and ultimately in the ocean. So the situation is really, really serious, and we have no idea what the long-term consequences of this is for the ecosystem, for species living in the ocean, and ultimately us at the top of the food chain as we are drinking, eating, and even having plastics rain down on us wherever we are.
Up next, the COVID crisis has in many ways woken the world up to just how fragile our existence is, giving an added urgency to the climate change message. However, for Nina Jensen, it's not come without its downsides too.
The pandemic has contributed to an increasing use of plastics, including the face masks that we're now seeing littering beaches and the ocean and nature all over the world.
The pandemic has upended ordinary life across the entire world and forced us to confront a truly global challenge unlike anything we've seen before. One silver lining is that it has brought the threat from climate change firmly into focus. But for marine biologist Nina Jensen, the chief executive of REV Ocean, it has also created new challenges. This must have gotten much worse actually since the pandemic started. I mean, everywhere I turn, it's like you can't even have a cookie or, anything that's not single-use plastic or that's not wrapped in single because of health and safety reasons.
Yeah, and that's a bit of the problem with many of the challenges that we're facing, that when we are trying to fix one problem, we escalate or generate new problems. And of course, the pandemic has contributed to an increasing use of plastics, including the face masks that we're now seeing littering beaches and the ocean and nature all over the world. And of course, getting entangled in birds and other marine life, which is a massive problem. And it's just underlining the challenges that we as a society are facing. We are not producing things in a sustainable way. We're not using things in a sustainable way. And we're not thinking about the long-term consequences of our actions.
Does it have to be governments that change, or is it actually individuals? I know there's been a number of programs over the last 3 to 4 years that actually, you realize what you're doing when you drink something from a plastic bottle, when you eat something that has a plastic wrapping. So is it behavioral change that will lead the way, or does it just have to be governments because that will have the most impact and much more quickly?
It has to be a bit of everything, actually. And change, of course, starts with ourselves. So we can all play our role in this by cutting out single-use plastics from our daily lives, but also, of course, making sure that we reduce our consumption and also properly dispose of the plastic and other waste that we're using. But we can't really put all of the burden and responsibility on individual consumers. Ultimately, the responsibility sits with those that are producing the plastics and, of course, using it in a large degree. And they have to be regulated by the policymakers. So that's why the ban on single-use plastics is a good one, but we also need to stop using virgin plastics, for example, or producing virgin plastics, and increasingly focusing on recycling what we've already produced.
What about overfishing? So again, there's been a number of documentaries where you basically look at it and then you have tears in your eyes about what we're doing to some of the fish and some of the beautiful marine biology out there in the oceans. Are people going to change the way they consume fish, or is it countries that actually need to find a new way of fishing sustainably?
Again, I think it's a little bit of both. As consumers, we can make conscious choices by only choosing certified sustainable seafood. And actually, seafood is still one of the best choices if you care about environmental challenges. But ultimately, the responsibility sits with the governments and policymakers to regulate the way that we are running our fisheries so that they are in line with stock assessments, with what the science is telling us, and of course, protecting really important and vulnerable habitats so that they can continue to produce fish and seafood in the years to come.
So, Nina, with REV Ocean, where are you hoping to have the most impact? I know, and I find fascinating the fact that, a lot of people say that they're nature lovers or that there's, conservationists, and then there's capitalism on the other side. You basically believe that it's only by including philanthropists and capitalists, I guess, that you get stuff done because they have the most money. Would that be a fair representation?
Absolutely. And, as an environmental activist who've been focusing on this for a very, very long time, of course, I see the impact that we can have as environmental activists, but it's not enough in terms of the challenges that we're facing. So unless we can get capitalism, big industrial players in the corporate sector to play alongside and take their responsibility, we're not going to have the impact that we need. So that's why I decided to myself team up with an industrialist and a capitalist who has pretty much always succeeded at the business ventures that he's set forth. And given that we share the same passion for saving life in the ocean, I actually think that we now have a fighting chance to do exactly that.
Is it true that it's less than 1% of all global philanthropic efforts that go to the ocean?
That's what they say. And that's, of course, simply put, a drop in the ocean. And of course, I'm hoping that an initiative like the REV Ocean initiative can change that. So we are hoping to invite philanthropists from all over the world, key decision makers and celebrities to come out with the REV Ocean vessel and firsthand explore the ocean, understand and appreciate its beauty, and be part of the solution. Because I think that in many parts has been what's lacking. The ocean seems so out of sight and out of mind, but if you can bring it closer to heart and actually bring people down into the ocean to see firsthand what is going on, then hopefully people will want to be part of the solution.
Who would be your ideal celebrity to come on board and spread the message?
Well, obviously there are quite a few on top of the list as we want to create more engagement. One of the top celebrities that have very broad reach in social media is, of course, The Rock. So he would be very high on the list. But of course, also the president of the US, the president of China. I'd love to have both of them part of the REV Ocean mission alongside global philanthropists to really make a big impact.
Nina, when you look at philanthropy across the world, how's it changed? So are we, again, is it about message spreading, or is it just putting a lot of money to where it makes a difference? So in terms of data collection and then on finding these scalable solutions?
Well, I think sustainability and environmental issues are more top of mind now than they used to be. It's been quite heavy lifting to actually get people to care. But now we see huge changes in the financial sector with policymakers and, of course, with the business and industries that they do care, and also they don't have a choice. They are increasingly being regulated to deal with the environmental consequences of their production. And, of course, consumers are demanding it. And we're also seeing that people don't really want to work for companies that don't own up to their environmental responsibility. And of course, that's when the magic starts happening, because when individuals, your workforce, your investors, your board are all demanding sustainability, that's when you start looking for the business solutions that can actually take care of the problems. And that's when things start changing rapidly.
Up next, how does Nina respond to critics who question whether a multi-million-dollar super yacht is really what's needed to save the oceans?
It opens up a world of opportunities in terms of getting people with money, people with power, people that actually need to change their behavior to protect the ocean. This is the opportunity to actually get them to care.
The REV Ocean is currently under construction in Romania. Once complete, it will be the largest research and expedition vessel in the world. But with a price tag of at least $350 million, some critics have questioned whether this super expensive super yacht is what's really needed to save the oceans. I asked Chief Executive Nina Jensen for her response to those who say it sends the wrong message on sustainability.
They are absolutely right. Of course, building the world's largest research and expedition vessel that is also a super yacht is not necessarily sustainable. However, it opens up a world of opportunities in terms of getting people with money, people with power, people that actually need to change their behavior to protect the ocean. This is the opportunity to actually get them to care. By inviting them to come on board the REV Ocean initiative or a vessel, by showing them that a vessel can actually be built and operated sustainably, and be presented to the many solutions that we will be working with organizations and scientists from all over the world, then I really think that it's actually worth it.
What are you most proud of in the vessel? I know you've been using some pretty cool new technology about, you know, how to make it more friendly.
I think it's that sustainability runs through every single thing that we do, down to the soap that is in the showers, the materials that have gone into building the vessel, the battery packs, the solar coating, the uniform program, everything that we do. But one particularly cool thing is, of course, when we reached out to one of our suppliers and we wanted sustainable decks on board the vessel. And the immediate response was that it didn't exist, or they didn't have it to offer. And of course, with a philanthropist and a billionaire building a vessel, demanding it, then the situation changes. So we ended up with getting something called Limba, produced from Cameroon, that is FSC certified and is now one of the top-selling products from the company Wool's Nautical that we bought it from. So it just shows the impact that you can actually have by bringing something to market that didn't originally exist, and that can actually, hopefully, also have ramifications outside of this one vessel, but also for other yachts being produced in the future.
You know, I'm going to ask you about what Jensen Utopia looks like. So do we all eat less fish, less meat? Do we travel less? Is there, such a thing as the world in which you would hope we're thriving towards?
Well, it would definitely be an environment or a world where we don't take nature for granted, but where we see ourselves as an integral part of nature, where we're not consuming more than nature can regenerate, but helping to restore and protect critical areas, and then just harvesting from the surplus. So it has to be a fully circular system where we are not wasting food, wasting energy, wasting water, but basically using everything that we need to have a good life in a sustainable way.
I feel like we're going at it at a glacial pace, right? It's slow.
Yeah, it's way too slow. It's way too slow. And of course, we're now at COP26. World leaders have been talking about the climate change problem for 3 decades, and emissions are still rising, despite the fact that this is the biggest challenge the world has ever been facing. So yes, it is a glacial pace, and we need to really, really scale up quickly. But that's why I also am encouraged by seeing increasingly the investment community and the business sector really stepping up to the plate, because policymakers and regulators will not be able to solve this alone.
I hope to speak to you before then, but in 5 years, how much progress do you think we will have done on this topic?
Well, we have to have made massive progress on a number of issues. So hopefully we've put a halt to new oil and gas developments. We have found a way to integrate complete circularity in our systems so that we're not wasting plastics into nature. We've been able to recover a lot of the waste that we've already distributed into the ocean in particular, and we're seeing a dramatic decrease in CO2 emissions.
Jensen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.